Good morning, YouTube! Hello, Builder fam, and good morning. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about vehicle maintenance, and specifically how to prepare or check your vehicle for a trip. So the family and I are going away to Virginia for the week, and I felt like it was necessary to go over the vehicle and check it out to make sure that we'll be good for this trip. Now, I have here my vehicle is a 2005 Chevy Suburban 2500. I bought this vehicle specifically for the features it has and the room it has to allow us to travel easier since we have the child. Now, this isn't real complicated. There are four main things that you need to check on a vehicle before you travel any long distance. That's your fluids, your pressures, your tires, and your brakes. So we'll check the fluids underneath the engine. That involves the coolant, the windshield washer fluid, the brake fluid, as well as the power steering fluid. It also involves checking the air pressures, the tire pressures to be specific. Then you check the tire tread to make sure you have enough and that it's wearing correctly. And then, last but certainly not least, you check the brakes to make sure they're going to last you through the trip. So I'm going to try and make this video short and sweet without too many editing faux pas in here, because I don't really think we have a whole lot of time left in the day. But let's get started by popping the hood and going underneath to check the fluids. So here's where most of the fun happens. Most of you guys already know about checking the oil in your car. That's pretty straightforward. You find your dipstick, which in this case happens to be this yellow-handled gadget over here. You pull her out. Here's the trick. You wipe her off first. The reason you wipe her off is because the oil splashes around in there and you'll get a false reading. So wipe it off, stick her back in completely, pull her out again. And then you just read where the level's at. And it looks like I could use a quart. In case you didn't know, a little tip. The amount of volume between the bottom of the crosshatch and the top of the crosshatch, or the bottom of the line and the top of the line, is usually a quart. So it looks like I could use a quart in this. Now, to be honest, I just changed the oil in this thing a while ago, and I don't think I ever even put the complete total amount in there to begin with, but we'll top that up with a quart and be happy with that. There's also the transmission fluid. Now, the transmission fluid on this vehicle I can check, but a lot of modern vehicles, you cannot check the transmission fluid because the transmissions are being built differently now than they were in the past. Transmissions nowadays are sealed components and they're non-serviceable. Well, they're serviceable by a technician or a mechanic, but not by the average person. So I'm going to leave that for a different day in a different video. The second fluid we're going to check is our coolant level. Now, this is very important. I want you guys to listen to me very, very closely. Never, ever take off your radiator cap if the vehicle is warm. Don't do it. There's a scientific explanation as to why, and it has to do with the 5 psi of pressure that the coolant system is under. 5 to 25 if I'm not mistaken. This one is a 15 psi. So the coolant system's under 15 psi. Well, at 15 psi, that raises the boiling point over 212 degrees. So with the coolant sitting in your engine at 230 degrees, and you release the pressure, your boiling point instantly drops to 212, which makes the fluid, all of the fluid in the system, boil at once, instantly, which is what creates the geyser and will F you up. So when I say do not take the radiator cap off of a warm vehicle, don't do it. My vehicle's not warm, so I'm going to take it off. Now, there is, on modern vehicles with the overflow tank, it is as simple as looking. There is a level marker on these here clear plastic tanks. There's a level marker. The fluid must be between here and here, minimum and maximum. And sometimes you just give it a little shake and, oh yeah, there's the fluid level, and you're good with that. Mine's a little older and it's a little dirty, so I'm going to go ahead and poke my eye in here and look. And yep, our fluid level is good. So I'm happy with that. That means I don't have a coolant leak and my fluid doesn't look all that crappy. I need a quart of oil and we're good with coolant. Kira, what do you think? Is the truck ready to go?
Okay.
Yeah? Can you say hi? Oh, you little adorable. Now, checking your brake fluid, your power steering fluid, and your wiper fluid is actually pretty straightforward. The brake fluid, you just take the cap off and you check it. Now again, it's a transparent bottle. There's a minimum and a maximum line. If your vehicle's a little older like mine is, it might be stained, so just give it a little shake to make sure you can actually see where the level is. You're not gonna break anything, don't shake it too much, but you can give it a little shake just to see where the fluid is. Make sure it's within the minimum and maximum value. Your power steering fluid is also really important and easy to check. Now, there's a couple things you have to read here. There is a full when it's hot and a full when it's cold. Now, I already told you to check the coolant when the engine is cold. So you're going to be checking this at the same time so the engine is cold. So the fluid level should be up to there. So we're going to take it. After drying the stick off, we're going to put it back in, pull it out, and there you go. It's actually a little overfull. Don't tell anybody. And your windshield washer fluid, which in this case just happens to be right here, that's pretty straightforward. You just put fluid in until it's full. Sometimes there's a little, like a foam indicator float or something like that, which if you have one of those, goody for you. But it's pretty straightforward. You just add until it's full. So that pretty much takes care of the fluids that we're checking in the vehicle. There are other fluids in the vehicle, but those are not fluids that you're going to short-term service or check for a long-distance trip. So let's go to the wheels, where we're going to check the brakes and the tread. So handling the wheels is not a daunting task. If you've never done it, it's not that difficult to do. I'm not going to take the time in this video to go over how to handle the wheels, taking them on and putting them off, at least not by hand, because I don't have the time. But let's go ahead and take this wheel off. We are going to use our handy dandy Milwaukee impact gun to do so. Yeah, buddy. These are just plastic caps that hold a center hub on. It's just a cover, no big deal. Now, some of you are going to give me grief because I'm not using an impact socket. Well, I couldn't find my impact socket 7/8, so this is what we got. And it should be fine. It'll be fine as long as these bolts aren't ridiculously torqued, which they shouldn't be. This is an aluminum wheel. You over torque an aluminum wheel, you'll really screw them up. Now at this point, I have the truck up on wheel stands. I also have the emergency brake pulled and the wheels blocked. So I'm going to go ahead and jack this up to take the weight off the wheel so I can then unbolt it and pull it off. Now you don't want to actually lift these things off the ground that far. These bastards are heavy, and you don't want to lift it any more than necessary. Little tip, if you have a hubcap, which technically I think this classifies as a hubcap, you can use it as a bowl. That reminds me of a joke. So this guy's driving his Honda down the road, gets a flat tire, pulls over, notices a big fence where he pulled over. It says right on the fence that it's an insane asylum. He goes, oh, well that's not good. Either way, he takes his hubcap off, he puts it upside down, takes the 4 lug nuts that are on it off and puts them in the hubcap. No big deal. He's just about ready to put the spare tire on and bolt it up when a big truck drives by, knocks the hubcap over, and all of the lug nuts go down the drain. He stands there thinking, now what am I gonna do? No more lug nuts. All of a sudden, while he's thinking, he hears a guy across the fence say, oh, hey mister, if you took 1 lug nut off of each of the other wheels, you would have enough to bolt that wheel on and get to a station and get more lug nuts. And the guy thought, well, there's 4 lug nuts. If I took 1 off of each other wheel, that leaves me with 3 lug nuts on all 4 wheels, which is enough to carefully to get to a station and replace them. And he thought, well, that's pretty smart. So he looks at the guy on the fence and goes, yo, dude, what are you doing in there? And the guy goes, kidneys, man, kidneys. Dad joke. All right, at this point, I want to talk about tire tread and how important it is. For starters, You gotta have some. If you look at your tire and it's smooth, you got problems and you need to get new tires. What's important here, these tires are getting a little on the older side. And so you can see a little bit of dry rot happening and some chips coming out. So these tires are due for replacement because they're old. The older a tire gets, the rubber starts to, I believe it's called vulcanize, which means it gets harder. The harder the rubber is, the less it grabs the pavement, so the less effective the tire is. A newer tire is a safer tire. Now in this case, as far as the tread depth goes, we probably have a good 8 to 10 30-seconds in here. That's good. You want to worry about your tires. Like, you want to start thinking about replacing them when you start to get down to 4 to 2 30-seconds on your tire. And an easy way to tell that, I don't know if you can see in the video, but there's what's called a wear bar that goes right across the tire. All tires have them. So basically, if you look at your tire and you can see tread and tread and tread, and then there's a spot where there's a solid line that goes right across the tire, well then you're due for new tires, because that's now below 2 30-seconds. The next most important part, and this is a mechanic's trick, there's a thing called reading the tire. The tire tread wears differently when the suspension of the vehicle has any problems. For example, if you have the inner side of the tire wearing lower than the outer side of the tire, you probably have camber issues. If you have the tire, well, if the tire wears out just way too quickly, you might have toe issues. If you have a choppy or dishy look, like you can rub your hand across and instead of being smooth, you can actually feel it ribbed, then you quite possibly need shock or other alignment issues. Either way, you want to make sure that the tire tread is smooth and even. If it's not smooth and even, then you should take your vehicle to the shop that has an alignment rack and get the alignment checked. In this case, I'm happy with these tires. We're gonna roll them. That brings us to the last and most important thing that we need to check, and that's our brakes. There's basically two things that I'm going to check on these brakes. One is the rotor. This here part that spins, that's called the rotor. The pads are anchored fast to the actual, well, it's the steering knuckle, but they're anchored fast, and the pads squeeze against the rotor. That's how the brakes work. The pads squeeze against the rotor, causes a stopping motion. Now, the rotor, you want to look for a consistent, nice, smooth pattern in the rotor. If you see discoloration spots, or if you see big gouges and just a really rough looking rotor, chances are there's something wrong with it. You should get it looked at professionally. In this case, I got a nice smooth finish. I don't even have much of a lip, which means these are not very worn in. The next most important thing is the depth of the pad. Now I can see the depth of the pad by looking in here, and you can see the pad is right here. It's hard to point out. So let me grab the camera. It's gonna get shaky here for a little bit. This right here is the pad, this thing. And if you look, right in there, you can see the metal and then the grip surface of the pad. Let me get a better angle. There's a nice good shot of it. Oh, beautiful. So there you can see, let me get my finger in here. Oh, there it is. So you can see right there is the metal plate, and then right between the metal plate and the rotor is the actual gripping surface of the brake pad. Now you can see just by this picture that's good and thick. Let me set this back down and make sure we're actually looking in the right direction. Yeah, all right. As far as the thickness of your pads, the thicker the better. But you want to be really worried about it when you start getting down to 4 to 2 30-seconds. Again, how do you know whether it's 2 to 4 30-seconds? I'd say, yeah, that works. If I put 2 quarters together, the thickness of those 2 quarters, if your brake pads, if the grip material on your brake pads is that thin, yeah, you need to be looking at new brakes. You might be asking, what about the back brakes? In this case, I'm going to say, your back brakes, as a general rule of thumb, only get replaced every other time you replace the front brakes. They wear out a lot slower because you're doing primarily, I think it's 75% of your stopping force is done through the front brakes. So since the front brakes looks good, I'm not even going to worry about the back ones. Now we can go ahead and put the wheel back on. Now here's something very important to remember when you're putting on wheels. These bolts are countersunk. They're a wedge fit. This thing needs to be centered correctly. And because of that, you don't just tighten these up in a circle. In fact, you tighten them up in a star pattern or as close to a star pattern as you can get. I will demonstrate. Lug it up on one, move two over, lug it up on that one, move two over, lug it up on that one, two over, back to our original bolt. That is very important. If you do not follow that pattern, if you don't do that, you risk having your wheel fall off on you. I'm not joking, it happens a lot. Also, the reason I'm not just glugging them on with the gun is because you're supposed to torque them on with a torque wrench, a device used to measure and make sure that every bolt gets the exact same amount of torque applied to it. So I'm gonna go get my torque wrench and we'll torque these suckers on. Now, values vary when it comes to how much torque you're supposed to put on vehicles. You can look up the specs, just Google it. It's as easy as Googling it. I usually like to follow a general rule of thumb that most cars, especially late model cars with the aluminum wheels, you're looking around 80 to 100 foot-pounds. Most larger vehicles like small size trucks, you're looking between 100 to 120 foot-pounds. So again, we're gonna follow the same star bolt pattern to make sure these are properly tightened. Now that we know that our wheel is actually properly and professionally installed, we go ahead and put the hubcap back on. This doesn't matter near as much. So we just spin her on. Just like so. So that takes care of most of what we needed to check. The last thing on the list is checking the tire pressures. That can be done with something as simple as a simple tire pressure gauge. They're not complicated to use. You unscrew the cap on the nozzle, push this up there, and read the pressure. Now, something I want you guys to know, every vehicle manufacturer puts a sticker, at least for the United States, puts a sticker on the driver's door sill that tells you what the vehicle wants the tire pressure to be at. That's what you should be setting the tire pressure to. The vehicle manufacturer decides what they want their tire pressure set at because it affects ride quality and it affects handling of the vehicle. A little tip, if you want to get just that extra edge on fuel mileage, your tires can actually handle more pressure than what your car says it wants. So if you put the tire pressure, say 10 PSI higher, you have a smaller contact patch between the tire and the road surface. The tire rolls across the road surface easier and gains you just a fraction of an extra umph of a mile a gallon to make your efficiency just a little better. Now, I'm not going to worry about that as much because, let's face it, this is a 7,500 pound vehicle and that's not really going to make much of a difference. But something to keep in mind when you're checking your own vehicles. So that takes care of our pre-trip inspection on the vehicle. Hopefully you guys can apply that knowledge whenever you need to go on a trip and you want to check out your vehicle, and have fun doing so. Until the next time, guys, take care and have a good night. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if you liked the video. Thanks.
Bye-bye.